As Rob mentioned, yep, I'm head of engineering Lab 11. We're like an engineering studio, venture capital firm all rolled into one. I used to do a lot of APIs and microservices in my career till recently, where I took a hard pivot into this whole blockchain thing. I mean, over a beer we can talk about why I did that, but for this talk, I'm just trying to make sense of what I used to know and this new world that I'm trying to work with and kind of connect them together. I know this topic could sometimes be, controversial, divisive, but to me, as you can tell by my unkempt beard, I'm an engineer, so I look at it as just another tech out of hundreds that I've been using, just one more added to the pile. So, and this being API days, I'm not sure where people sit on their level of kind of like they know about this stuff, so I thought maybe it's a good idea just to start off, like get a feel for the room. I mean, the people that are watching this online, they can probably just pause it and Google things. So, but for you guys in the room, let's be a little bit nicer. So, just show of hands, who knows roughly what blockchains are, what Bitcoin is? Yeah, Bitcoin's kind of like in the zeitgeist. Yep. Bitcoin these days, I think it's just like digital gold. It's just something that has value and can be kind of like transferred between people, like digital asset. How about Ethereum? Anyone knows what that is? Yeah, kind of. The merge is coming in like an hour. So Ethereum was basically they looking at Bitcoin and like, this is cool, but can I make this be a programmable money? So that's where things like smart contracts came up, which is running a piece of code on the chain rather than just having it as like just like digital money. How about Solana? Anyone heard of that? Just except when Rob mentioned it like a minute ago. Yeah, so Solana is kind of part of this third generation after Bitcoin and Ethereum, where they're like, Ethereum's cool, but can I have it so a transaction doesn't take 15 minutes and, I don't know, you have to take a second mortgage to actually pay for the fees of it. So that's where this third generation came out with. Solana, Avalanche, there's a whole bunch of them with a lot of healthy and sometimes unhealthy competition between them. And their idea was that let's just try to make this cheap and scalable so you can actually use it to do things. As Rob mentioned, we are kind of concentrating on Solana. I know Solana the best, so I'm going to use it in this talk, but a lot of the topics or concepts will apply to basically anything in that generation. Obviously, they achieve it in different ways. How about APIs? Who knows about it? Okay. I think by the end of the API Days conference, I'm hoping everyone in the room. Cool, so I kind of get a good feeling for where you guys are at. Actually, there was a lot of hands up, more than I expected for this conference. So I realized this was going to be like only like a 20-minute talk, and so I had to write a whole new talk, and I didn't even time it, so God help us, it's probably not going to be 20 minutes. But what I ended up doing was just take the theme of this conference, which you can probably see on the kind of like the banner there, enabling business networks. And I'm going to use this to kind of structure my entire talk, and I'll just pull it apart and talk about how this applies to blockchain. So let's get started. Let's talk about networks. So a lot of people think of blockchains as just ledgers. They're like, I don't know, something that does double entry accounting. While that is true, especially in the newer generation of blockchain, it's much, much more than that. And basically, they're consensus networks these days. They're a way of getting a bunch of nodes that don't trust each other to agree on something. With the case of Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's about getting them to agree that this piece of work that one node was done. Everyone else in the network, or at least the majority, agrees that that was done correctly. With something like Solana, it's more about let's get it to get all the nodes to agree what time it is and use that intrinsic values to kind of like achieve consensus of sorts. Actually, one of the reasons like Solana is using time is, turns out spending time has a slightly less impact to the climate than actually running CPU and memory like the mining rigs do. So that's one of the reasons we're actually looking at it, because it's kind of not killing the planet as fast as everything else is. I mean, it doesn't need help. Humanity is doing that by themselves. So this network is, in Solana, they're made up of nodes called validators. I just took this screenshot, I think, last week from, it's called solanabeach.io. You can jump on there now, have a look at it, probably live. It's sometimes just open and look at it because it's so mesmerizing. But basically, it's showing every node in the current mainnet, so the main network. That's because Solana has a few different networks, but the mainnet's the main one, I guess, by the name. So you can see there are nodes running in different clusters, like there were some in US, Europe, Japan, South Asia, got some big numbers, Australia, not much or at all. Yeah, things are really early here. But what you can see also on the side is that kind of the network picks a leader, and that leader kind of uses his time slot to look at all the transactions that are coming in, run that transaction, then pass on the hat to someone else who becomes leader and does that work. So it is truly a network these days. It's not just like a ledger. So this network actually comes with a few attributes that are quite interesting, especially to someone like me that come from, like, you know, as I mentioned, doing a lot of API, a lot of like public clouds, a lot of Kubernetes, a lot of that stuff. There are some interesting attributes that kind of blew my mind a little bit. First of all, when you look at it, it's kind of like a planet-sized computer. It's like one giant computer that you're interacting with. Yeah, it's made of like 1,000+ nodes, but still you can do compute on that computer. Not as novel of an idea these days with public clouds and all the different, you know, massive Kubernetes clusters you can run, but it's still quite interesting, especially the sheer scale of it. And things like, I don't know, Moore's law and things like that means that it keep getting bigger and bigger. Obviously, this is a public computer, so everyone, you're competing with everyone else to use it, and you have to pay fees for the transaction, but that's the same thing as if you're paying on AWS to run your node anyway, to do that sort of work. Another kind of like tightly coupled attribute is that the state, so obviously you're running programs on chain. Those programs will have a state, or they need to be fed a state. And those states available, like, doesn't matter which validator becomes the leader that needs to run a transaction you just send to the entire network. They have all the state required, so that's all loaded up. This is the sort of thing that kind of blew my mind a little bit, because as someone who had to build like a stateful microservices for so long, just not have to think about it at all, and just give this thing, define all the state, define the program, launch it all into the thing and say, just make it work. That was kind of amazing. Again, like, there's always a cost to maintaining that state, because those validators, and validators could be anyone. Like, you can just download the validator binary today, just run it. Obviously, you can put some liquidity in it, make it more popular so more people use it and so on, but like anyone can start using it. So having something like that suddenly you can have access to the same state no matter where you are on each of the nodes is kind of interesting. A side effect of those two is the fact that you naturally have kind of like transactions. When you do something on the net, when you send a transaction to the network, to the blockchain, it just does the work. If it succeeds and everyone agrees that, yep, the work was done, it becomes part of the chain. If it doesn't become part of the chain. So it has this very natural rollback mechanism where if something fails, it just doesn't become part of the chain. So it's almost rolled back to the last block. This may sound trivial, but when you think about it, that this transaction, especially on this sort of public blockchains, are running across, I don't know, 5 different programs built by 5 different themes that just doing all different things, and somehow you can do something and it just like roll back the entire thing that's talking to like all these different platforms at the same time. That's the sort of transactionality that if I was going to build it myself, I wouldn't. And one of the last things, and I guess this is where people, you know, with the libertarian ideologies and things like that really warms their cockles, is the fact that it's permissionless. There are no gatekeepers. It's anyone, as I said, can just start a validator if they want. Or today you can run a transaction against mainnet or deploy something on there. So there are no companies you have to convince to for you to deploy this thing. There's no subscription to buy. It's that level of permissionlessness kind of makes it that available to everyone to use. So those are some of the attributes that I find interesting about this network. And we talked about enough networks, but let's talk about how is this useful? Why the heck am I talking about this in an API conference, right? So, and that becomes quite obvious if you look at, this is a super high-level simplified architecture of what Solana is, right? It's usually a client. Could it be a mobile or a web app? Could be just some automation, a CLI, talking to some sort of RPC node, and that is talking to the validators, or RPC node and validators actually could be the same thing because it's literally one binary. You just get different flags. And that's basically what the network is. And it's just, to a client, it looks like a single API. That's all you're doing. You're sending transactions to it. You are querying accounts. You are subscribing to like a WebSocket to listen to different events that are happening on the chain. And that little dotted box on the corner there, that's kind of like the conceptualized runtime. So that's where you got your programs. And what they call accounts, it's not a great name. In this case, a lot of times accounts are basically files. That's your state. That's where the state is stored. But like when you look at it, this just looks like your average distributed system with a client-server architecture, right? So this is where everything is basically, there is a very common API interface, and all the clients talk to that common API interface. Even the validators, when they talk to each other, there is a common API interface. They use that to talk to each other. And this is, so what Solana uses between the clients and the actual nodes, as the name RPC nodes may have gave it away, is the Json Rpc. It's kind of, I don't know if you ever use those old school RPCs over XML. Yeah. Running out of time. By the way, if anyone's in the selling like dev portals, they can probably sell one to Solana, guys, because this is just one giant web page. Doesn't look right. Another interface or API that you can see is clients or other programs calling a program. They even provide a very common structure for that to happen. You say, okay, I want to call this program. This is all the accounts or files that I need to have, and this is kind of like the function arguments or the instruction data that I want to happen for that instruction. And every single program on chain uses this. So that means that you can call any program that you want, which makes it interesting. As an aside, we actually built a Postman for Solana because it's one of those spaces, a lot of this blockchain stuff, where things aren't as quite young and there are gaps. So it makes it interesting for some people to just build things. So we built like a Postman for Solana. We actually this morning, we saw, because of submitted to the hackathon, and this morning we won one of the awards out of like 400 plus submissions, because it's something that doesn't exist, but it's helpful, right? Having something that calls Solana. By the way, what did we call it? Terrible name. Better call Sol. The Solana's native token is called Sol. And I will continue to use that name till AMC sends me a cease and desist letter. Anyway, let's talk about business part. We're running out of time. So the one attribute I didn't talk about is the composability. We have all these primitives, and they're very useful, but they're very low level. What other companies and teams and platforms have done is taken those and just build more complicated and sophisticated things on top. That's the thing that is used these days by the modern players to kind of disrupt the whole ecosystem. I'm just going to throw some. There's a lot of stuff happening on in these ecosystems at the moment. Obviously, NFTs, monkey pictures, all that stuff is pretty big. The gaming's pretty big. This is from last year, by the way. Every time market goes up and down, new things start, old things die. But DeFi is by far the biggest part of the ecosystem. There's a lot of different application, things like lending, things like automated market makers, order books, I don't know, like staking or yield farming. It's kind of like having a deposit account where you can deposit some tokens and kind of get profit from that. So all this stuff was built by those primitives that are on top. And just to show you, and this is again from last year, but there's a lot of money actually going through this. So as far as the business is considered, there is business happening that is enabled by this platform. And there is not as much stuff happening in Australia. I saw this the other day on Twitter. It shows a lot of different things that are happening, which is kind of like homegrown here. If I ever get my act together to update the database, we would be added to that box up there. I'll do it one day. But that's pretty much I really rushed through that, I'm sorry, but it's only blame API days for this 20-minute slots. But basically, that's what this is about. Before I started looking at this space, it was really, I never heard of a single tech company product that was in this space. And I still, when I started, I had to learn a lot about it. And to be honest, I still think we're very early. There is a lot happening in this space, and as I said, because of that permissionlessness, anyone can be in here doing things. And those big tech giants that are there in the other parts of the business, they still haven't gotten a foothold here. So really, any of us can be the next big tech giant in this space because, as I said, there are no gatekeepers, and we are just, all it takes is a bunch of enterprising people and some good ideas to start building the next thing, and hopefully we're going to be one of those. Sorry I rushed through that. That's me. Everything happens on Twitter, unfortunately, with crypto, so that's where I am. If you want bad jokes, you can follow me. Some blogs, but is there any questions? I know I went through that super hard. Rob?
What's the coolest use case you've seen on Solana so far?
The coolest use case. So a lot of the use cases are finance related, so I don't consider them cool. One of the biggest things that's happening right now is this movement called Move to Earn, Get Fit to Earn. I can't remember what it's called. One of the biggest ones is called a step-in. It's just about, you're just moving around, and you got an app, and you use that to actually, as you do fitness stuff, you actually earn tokens, and you can then use those tokens to actually do all this stuff that we talked about. You can put it on exchanges, you can spend it, and that's probably one of the biggest use cases happening. Like they have a very big TVL, like total value locked at the moment on Solana, and that's one of the cooler ones. There's heaps happening, and again, the market goes up and down, more stuff comes out, but like a lot of payment-related stuff's also happening, but again, I don't consider them cool, but they're very necessary, like things like foreign exchange and things like that, where if you try to do it through Western Union, it's going to take days. Imagine doing that in an instant. So yeah.
What's your thoughts on NFTs?
NFTs. All right, NFTs are an interesting one. Now, I understand it. Like, as you can see, I don't even have stickers on my laptop. I'm not one of those people that likes to have stuff like that. But I fully understand what they are. They represent something. I mean, because I'm a gamer, I understand like people do pay money for hats for your characters that does nothing to your gameplay, but still people will pay money for it. So from that point of view, it's very interesting. People like to have those things to show each other that this is something that they own. But I feel like a lot of more of the activity on this is other people realizing this first group of people find value in it. So now they're spending money buying it so they can sell it off or do kind of like swaps. So I think as long as one person thinks something has a value, there'll be 10 other people that gonna make sure they can kind of like get into that space and kind of like try to make profit off it. So, but I fully understand the mentality of having like NFTs, but I myself don't have a whole lot of them because I don't like gathering stuff. Maybe I'm a psychopath. Maybe they're the normal ones. But NFTs are an interesting one. Do I still have time? No. 1 minute. So for example, in Solana, you can mint NFTs, and NFTs are basically something that you can only make one of. That's called a non-fungible. So you can't ever make a second one of. So it is a good thing. And NFTs themselves aren't really the point. It's the utility you can have behind it. For example, you can use that NFT as saying that, oh yeah, I'm part of this community. Now I can show this NFT to another website and gain access to something that other people that don't have the NFT can access it. So there's a lot of this NFT gated utilities that are out there that can use this mechanism. Just basically showing that you belong to a community. That's the biggest part of what this NFT is doing for people, without having you to give away your identity, your sovereignty, and all of that. So that's probably a better answer than the first one I gave. Cool. All right, thank you.